The pain you feel when someone betrays you is rarely about the action itself. It is about the sudden, violent collapse of a fantasy you constructed in your own mind. You meet someone, they offer a sliver of kindness, a momentary display of competence, or a fleeting understanding of your pain, and your mind does something incredibly dangerous. It fills in the blanks. It builds an entire architectural structure of personality around a single brick. You assume the confident person is also honest. You assume the gentle person is also loyal. You assume that because they see your vulnerability, they will protect it. But they were never that person. You are simply having a relationship with an illusion, a phantom born from your own unfulfilled needs and desperate hopes. And when the mask finally slips, when they inevitably act out of self-interest, survival or cruelty, you are left staring not at a stranger, but at the reflection of your own profound capacity for self-deception. Carl Jung understood that this phenomenon, this desperate clinging to the imagined versions of people, stems from a mechanism he called projection. We do not see others as they are. We see them as we are, or as we need them to be. The parts of ourselves we cannot tolerate, our deepest insecurities, our buried aggression, our unacknowledged desire for control, we cast outward onto the blank canvases of the people around us. When we hero worship someone, we are often projecting our own unrecognized potential. When we fiercely hate someone for a minor flaw, we are usually attacking the very trait we secretly harbor and despise within ourselves. Projection is a psychological defense mechanism designed to keep the ego safe from the terrifying reality of its own complexity. It is far easier to believe that the world is populated by perfect saviors and absolute villains than to accept that every human being is a fragmented, walking contradiction capable of immense grace and sudden cruelty. This is why society functions so smoothly on the surface. We have all unconsciously agreed to participate in a collective performance, a grand theater of polite deception. We wear masks designed to make us digestible to others. We perform the role of the agreeable employee, the supportive friend, the perfect partner. We prioritize social cohesion over authenticity because authenticity is dangerous. To be truly authentic means admitting to your jealousy, your boredom, your selfish desires, and your hidden resentments. It means disrupting the comfort of those who rely on your compliance. So we trade our truth for belonging. We smile when we are insulted. We agree when we dissent, and we stay silent when we should scream. But this performance requires an immense amount of psychic energy, and eventually, the mask becomes too heavy to maintain. The cracks begin to show, not in explosive confessions, but in microaggressions, delayed responses, passive-aggressive jokes, and sudden, inexplicable withdrawals. When the mask finally slips, the underlying reality is often chilling. You realize that many relationships are not built on genuine love or mutual respect, but on unconscious psychological contracts. We form bonds based on emotional transactions. I will make you feel powerful if you protect me from my fear of abandonment. I will act as your audience if you provide me with status. Will absorb your anxiety if you never leave me alone. These are not connections. They are hostage situations disguised as romance or friendship. And the moment one person decides to breach the contract, the moment the dependent one gains confidence, or the submissive one sets a boundary, the relationship instantly fractures. The other person doesn't mourn the loss of your essence. They mourn the loss of your utility. They become angry not because you changed, but because you stopped playing the role they assigned to you, the role they desperately needed to keep their own internal chaos at bay. The realization that human interaction is so heavily transactional can plunge you into a profound, isolating cynicism. You begin to view every act of kindness as strategic, every compliment as manipulation, every vulnerability as a trap. You retreat into a fortress of cold detachment, convincing yourself that this emotional numbing is a sign of superior intelligence. You tell yourself that you have finally woken up and see people for the predators they truly are. But this cynicism is just another mask, a defensive posture designed to protect you from the pain of hope. It is a refusal to accept the messy, contradictory nature of existence. By reducing everyone to purely self-interested actors, you avoid the much harder task of discerning nuance. You avoid the terrifying possibility that someone might actually be capable of genuine love, because hoping for that and being wrong again feels like a death sentence to the ego. But Jung warned that the descent into darkness does not end with observing the flaws of others. The true horror begins when you recognize those exact same flaws within yourself. The shadow is not a concept reserved for the people who hurt you. It lives in your own basement. It is the part of you that secretly enjoys watching a rival fail. It is the part of you that uses silence to punish someone who wounded your pride. It is the part of you that performs vulnerability just to secure reassurance. We spend our lives pretending these impulses do not exist, projecting an image of moral purity while our shadow pulls the strings from the unconscious. When you finally stop looking outward and turn the gaze inward, the moral superiority you use to distance yourself from the world collapses. You realize that you too are capable of manipulation, cruelty, and profound self-deception under the right circumstances. This realization, the integration of the shadow, is excruciating, but it is the only path to genuine psychological freedom. When you accept your own capacity for darkness, you stop demanding perfection from others. You stop dividing the world into pristine victims and irredeemable monsters. You understand that people do terrible things not because they are inherently evil, but because they are terrified, insecure, and completely unaware of their own internal mechanisms. They are driven by unresolved childhood wounds, desperate survival instincts, and a deep-seated terror of abandonment. This does not excuse their behavior, but it demystifies it. It removes the shock. When someone betrays you, you no longer ask, "How could they do this?" You understand exactly how they could do it, because you know what the human mind is capable of when it feels threatened. Your vision clears not because you have become a cynic, but because you have finally become an adult. The day you stop romanticizing people is the day you stop begging reality to be softer than it is. You stop expecting a manipulative partner to suddenly discover empathy. You stop waiting for an absent parent to offer the validation they never possessed. You stop projecting your own desperate hopes onto the blank screens of strangers. You begin to accept people exactly as they present themselves, trusting their consistent actions over their momentary words. You realize that most people are fighting a private psychological war they cannot even articulate. This clarity changes the way you move through the world. You become slower to trust, but your trust becomes impenetrable when earned. You become harder to manipulate because you no longer need the validation that manipulators use as currency. You find comfort in solitude because you prefer the quiet reality of your own company over the exhausting performance required to sustain an illusion, because ultimately, the greatest danger was never that other people could deceive you. The terrifying truth is that they rarely have to. Your own loneliness, your own desires, and your own unexamined projections do most of the work for them. We lie to ourselves long before anyone else gets the chance. We ignore the red flags because we prefer the warmth of the fire, even as the house burns down around us. But once you break the habit of romanticization, human nature ceases to be a horror story. It simply becomes human, flawed, contradictory, deeply wounded, and occasionally capable of grace. You stop needing people to save you, and in doing so, you finally grant them the freedom to simply exist. And more importantly, You grant yourself the freedom to navigate the world with open eyes, expecting nothing but the truth and accepting nothing less.